Hello and welcome to today's Skill Up session from ITIL and PeopleCert powered by Techstrong. I'm your host, Matt Barron, and today we are talking about how to overcome cultural resistance to service management. On our panel today, we have myself, Adrian. Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you.
And then what we're going to do before we get started, I want to let the audience know that this program is live and being recorded so you can view it again on demand. Also, there are chat and QA boxes on the right side of your screen to communicate with us. I don't know, the whole time that we've been doing these sessions, the chat has been lit up. So if you're attending today and you're live, post, where are you coming from? What part of the world are you from? I would love to hear who we've got here today. And while I'm talking about the stuff on the right-hand side and kind of seeing where everyone's coming from, Malaysia,
Maryland,
Costa Rica.
Wow.
Love it.
The whole
Love
world
to
is
be
here,
there
Matt.
right now.
The whole world.
The whole world is here. But while I'm talking about the stuff on the right, there is a link actually to next week's session in the handout section. And it's how service management is modernizing the service experience. Another great topic. I've loved all of these topics. They've just been right on the money. But let's get started with some introductions, because why not? Let's get started. Everyone's here waiting. Let's get to the meat. So thank you for joining us today, audience. Consider the relationship between service management and digital transformation. I'm glad that we can actually do this. A very big thank you to our panelist, Adrian, and myself. I guess I'm going to thank myself.
Yeah, thank you, man.
And next up is the help desk experience to make sure that you get to that. I want to introduce Adrian. He's the Senior Principal Success Architect for ServiceNow. He's been in the service management space since 1998, initially on the practitioner side and then switched to the consulting side. He's a firm believer in learning by making mistakes, and he's passionate about F1, music, movies, and food. Welcome, Adrian.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Let's get right to it. Let's get into org change, because this is a sticky topic, both literally and metaphorically. Let's talk about it. Why do you, generally speaking, why do you think that there is resistance to service management?
There's already a statement in there, right? I think people just in general resist. It's not just service management, right? I think people, whether you're in a company working for somebody, whether you have a company or whether you're at home, right? I always try to compare and draw analogies when I talk to people. But when I look at home, when I raise my kids, right? Do they always do what I tell them to do? No, they don't, right? They resist, they push back. And this goes back, like you said, I'm in this space already for 30 years, man. It's people really don't change, right? People resist to change, right? People don't want to do something else. You're in your comfort zone. You feel happy. You have your habits. Yeah, it's all in the head, right? And it's you have your habits. When I wake up in the morning, it is habitual how I get up. I go in front of the mirror. I brush my teeth. I put some water in my hair. But it's habitual, right? And I feel comfortable with that. And if tomorrow somebody comes along and says, hey, we're going to do things differently, and I'm like, what's going on, right? Why do I do this? So I start resisting, right? So that we see also within service management, right? Over the years that I've been doing this, organizations make big mistakes on how they introduce change. It's not that people don't want to change, but it's how they confront it with change, right? It's too fast. It's not explained. We don't understand the current situation. We don't understand what they're comfortable with. We don't understand what they really need to start doing. Right? That's the other part. Like, what do you really expect out of the change that you're doing? What do you expect when you introduce service management? What are your objectives? And I think one of the when you talk about challenges and why people resist is because a lot of times what I see is that people who deal with this address the organization as a one-size-fits-all. Right? We're not looking at the fact that there are different layers in organizations. There's a strategic layer. They have different objectives, a different way of thinking. There's the tactical layer, the people who manage everything that have to report up to the strategic, to leadership, and have to manage the people that are in the operation side of the house. Right? So they all have the difference, what's in it for me type of thing. So we have to address that differently, right? And that often doesn't happen. So it's comfort zone, it's learning curve. And even if I do understand it, right? I always, we talked about it a little bit before that, but I'm a little bit overweight. My doctor keeps telling me every time when I see him, I know what to do about it. But when my wife tells me, hey, let's start eating healthy tomorrow, I'm like, not tomorrow. Well, let's do it next week, right? So there's just a natural resistance, right, about habitual comfort and that kind of stuff. So service management, just one of the things that we resist.
Yeah.
What do you think, Matt?
Oh man, there's so much gold in there already, Adrian. You know, it's not easy. It's about comfort. Comfort. Yeah, I always say that comfort is the enemy, but that is intuitive to humans. We like I have to tell myself that so that I remember that being uncomfortable is change. That's how we actually get forward. That's how we move forward. And I think about like cultural change. I think about global change. For the longest time in the U.S., gay marriage wasn't legal. It wasn't something that everyone could do, and it had to be personal before people realized that it mattered to them.
Yeah.
And we have this very vulnerable contingent of people that were not given the right to do that. And once people realized, oh, I've got this friend that is also in this mindset, or oh, I'm in this mindset, and then once it becomes personal, then people realize, oh, we can actually change in this positive way. And I think like some of the best change initiatives that I've been a part of have centered around what you said. Why? Have centered around the helping people imagine what the future can be like.
Yeah.
And for me, that really that turned a light off in my head, that if people can imagine what the new working way can be, whether it be through ITIL training or reading the Unicorn Project or the Phoenix Project, or really reading any org change book, then once they see that, then it becomes their idea, their reality. They want to make it happen, which I think is like a cheat code for org change. That's how we can actually like get people convinced, is through storytelling and through helping them visualize the future. So you had a great response there. Great response.
No, I mean, I agree fully with you what you said, right? I think part of it also is that we need to there's a lot of pressure on us, right? I think when we talk about resistance and change, and when you say cultural change in my mind doesn't exist. You cannot change culture just by changing the culture. Just because you say, hey, I want it to be a all embracing, all encompassing, I want diversity. Just by saying that doesn't make it happen, right? Because it's culture is a group thing. So the basis in my mind always of culture is attitude and behavior. So we need to find out how can we influence the behavior of people and the attitude of people in order to achieve a different culture in the organization. So when we're talking about resistance, right, the only way to address that is to really, as leaders in an organization, you need to, and not that people who are not leaders in an organization cannot start that, but it just has a bigger impact, a bigger influence when leaders show by example that they are creating a culture of whatever it is they want to achieve, right? So a culture of belonging, a culture of embracing service management. And that when people make mistakes in adopting that and adapting to the new situation, that is not being punished, right? So in that learning curve, you also need to create this culture and behaviors and attitude of not punishing people when they make a mistake, right? And that is one big reason why people stay in their comfort zone. Because when I make a mistake, what are people going to do, right? What are they going to say? Will I still have a job next week if I don't show how good I am with the new thing? So it is, there's parts of the responsibility is to leadership to address that. Not just saying, I want to implement service management, or I want to do this, or I want to do that, but it's to understand upfront, create a plan, have a strategy, and come up with a plan on how am I going to make this happen? How am I going to support the people in my organization to be ready for the change, to adopt the change, and adapt to that change? And that is the part that I see missing quite a bit.
Yeah. How to make friends and influence people.
Exactly.
And you're getting to the point that Cheryl just asked in chat. Getting people to understand what they will get out of it is really hard. That what's in it for me, the whiffum.
Yeah.
That's so difficult. And it really ties into your point, Adrian, that people's jobs will get better. We don't necessarily know how, because we don't know if we're going to be successful or in what ways we're going to be successful, right? We're building the plane while we're flying it. So we don't know exactly where we're headed. But we saw this in DevOps too. I mean, this is kind of where DevOps kind of came from. The Calms idea and concept was really around, let's stop blaming each other.
Yeah.
Let's create a culture where we can grow and build this plane while we're flying it. We don't know where we're going, and that's okay. We get used to that discomfort so that we can be comfortable where we are, and that is that constant change.
Yeah, but that's tough, right? People, I think, as long as I've been on this earth, on this planet, we're not designed to just embrace everything, right? And help and support, right? I think we come from a place where it's survival of the fittest, right? So the easiest thing that I can do is just point to somebody else, like, you messed up, right? Because that makes me feel better, it makes me feel stronger. So it's very unnatural for us as humans, especially in an environment of a company where it's work, right, and that you're being paid for, and that you need the job to actually live, to start embracing things. And like you said, there's not a lot of companies, the ones that do it right, they start creating this culture, this environment of, when things go wrong, we're going to have a conversation on how can I make it better. We're not going to look into who was wrong, what was the mistake, right? We're just looking at what can we do to make it better. And Paul in the chat said, like, it's like trying to get cats to swim, right? They can, but they rather don't. That is absolutely true, right? That reflects and is a good analogy to us people as well. Now, the point to what you also said, man, right, about the whiffing, right? If we show cats that on the other side there might be something cool for them, they might take that leap, right? They may start to swim. So it's all about what is in it for them, right? Why should they start swimming, right? And I think it was Karen who also talked about engaging for a long term, right? So how do I keep people busy? Again, that is cultural change. It has to be interesting for them. There needs to be something in it for them. If there's nothing in it for them, one of the other things, I worked for a company also, right, where it literally was the attitude of, it's another thing that management is going to try to do, right? Just give it a few months. If we don't do this, it will.
They'll lose interest.
Yeah, don't worry about it, right? And that's the other part, right? It is about, if you want people to do something, be clear about what you want, tell them what's in it for them, but also stick to it, right? You have to give things a chance. Right? Before we came on this, when I go into organizations, obviously I go into organizations that need help, right? So I don't see a lot of things that go great. I see a lot of things that go wrong. And one of the things, and this is very much, I originally come from Europe, so I can compare a little bit Europe with America. What I see very much in the United States is organizations do not have patience. Yeah. So we come up with this new approach, we come up with this new thing that we need to do, and then after 3 months, 6 months, it's not yielding the results that we were looking for, that we had in our minds. So we're going to change things. We're going to do it differently, right? Where part of strategy, part of planning is that you need to understand that there is resistance. It will just happen. The question just is, how can I influence the downward spiral? So how deep will my resistance go, right? So how much will people stop from doing it or get upset or angry or push back?
Yeah.
And how long will it take? Those things I can influence, right? But influencing that means that I need to, first of all, plan for that and think about that. But I need to take that into consideration, right? In my roadmap, in my plan, I need to say that in month 1, our performance will go down. We will solve less incidents. We will have less changes. We will have less fulfillment because people have to get used to the new environment. They're learning, right? So that takes time. So you need to create that curve of how far do I go down before I go back up. What you will see then, if you keep following that curve, then you planned correctly, right? You predicted that it was going to be 50. We're 49, so we're close. That's great. Right? Rather than saying like, oh no, from day one, we're going to be 100, 200, 300, right? And that believability, that creating of, hey, they thought this through, they created the scenario, our leaders, the people who are making this change, understand where we're going. That on the other side creates a feeling of, hey, let's join, let's start. And yeah, I'll let you respond to that because I can talk about this for forever, but I'll let you respond to that first.
No, it's good to have breaks. It's good to get a moment to think about it too. I was reminded, I did a presentation on visualizing work, and I was reminded that there is actually a practice that I stole from HR. One of my buddies works for HR for this huge retailer in the United States, and he actually let me see behind the curtain a little bit. They actually have 4 specific changes that they're tracking in org change. They have a chart for every individual in the company to determine where are they at on the change curve, and it looks a lot like the hype cycle. If you've ever seen the Gartner hype cycle, where are you at? Are you in the trough of disillusionment, or are you now like finally coming on board with us? And it really, like when you were describing the cat not wanting to swim, I was thinking, okay, so the leader's job is to build the boat. How do we get that cat to be okay on the water because they're headed towards the catnip island or kibble island or whatever is good for them at the end? So it's about painting that picture. What is good for them? What would a better life be for that person? And then getting them there as safely and comfortably as possible. I feel like that's such a good metaphor for org change.
It is, right? And it sounds so simple. Unfortunately, it's never as simple as it sounds, right?
Yeah.
But I see also Michelle says, right, we need to address their fears. Absolutely true, right? Resistance to change is about fear, right? It's fear of the unknown.
Yes.
So let's make the unknown clear, right? Talk about the unknown. And this, in my mind, needs to start way ahead of the first action that you take, right? The first iteration. So months before, you need to start addressing in the organization, like, hey, in a few months from now, we have thoughts about changing X, Y, and Z, right? And that helps also with one part that is in my mind important, that it helps, is to give your employees, or the people that need to change and adapt to the change, give them some sense of control, right? You can influence. We're going to ask you guys. You are going to be part of this. Make it a collaborative effort, right? Because when I contribute to something, that makes me feel more comfortable. It helps with my learning curve because I have to think about it on what's going to happen. So give your employees this sense of control, right? Now, a little bit also back on addressing the fears, right? That's how correct that statement is. Also there, we need to make that a little bit more nuanced in my mind, right? People are people, but we're not the same, right? There's different types of people. And the exercise that I always do in my head, I don't never publish that, but I do in my head, is the exercise of willing and able. So I will look at people and I will ask in my mind the question, are they willing to adopt to this change and adapt? And are they able to adopt to this change? Now, people are willing and able when they're both easy. Just tell them what to do, where we're going, give them a task, and they will go ahead. When you're on the not able side, that's education, right? That's training. Just teach them, tell them. So we put some effort in there. If you're on the not willing side, then it becomes a little bit more challenging, right? The people that need the most attention, in my mind, are the people that are not willing, but they are able. They know how to do it. They have the smarts, they have the expertise, they have the skills. They're just not willing, right? We see that a lot of times with the more senior people in an organization. I've been here before, done this. This is how we've been doing this all the time. So I would say, let's address that part, right? So how can I get these people a little bit more sense of control into their destiny? What can we do to make life better for you as well with that change? So how can we create this win-win situation for each other, right? The what's in it for me. We are always left with then the people who are not willing, but they're also not able. That to me is the easiest part. I see a lot of organizations trying to get these people on our side, right? They're just not able to. They will never get there, right? So I always say, ignore those people, right? And I don't mean that in a bad way, but there's nothing we can do, right? They don't want to. We cannot teach them, so ignore them. Those are typically then the people especially after some big reorgs, that you'll see they will still not be comfortable. They don't like the new world, and they will slowly disappear, right? That is basically what happens. So give them, like I said, give them a sense of control, give them an advance warning, and be very organized and methodical about your change. Think things through a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. You need to consider the group mentality, the role mentality, and the personal mentality, because everyone is an individual. And your speaking reminded me that yes, there are people that are not willing and not able. There are people that are willing, but they need to be convinced. They're these conscious objectors. They really are. They're resistant to change, maybe because of past experience, right? Like,
it's always past experience.
Yeah. We've tried this before. It screwed up last time. It's going to screw up this time, and here's why. And Luigi Ferri in the QA section, thank you, Luigi, for attending today, pointed out specifically that there are champions too. So there's these two sets of people that I kind of see as really powerful for change. There's those conscious objectors. They're resistant to change, usually because of experience. You need to listen to them. Yeah. And then there's these other set of people, and I'm guilty because I love change. I am a change champion. I'm always the one who's carrying the flag. I can't wait to change our industry. I can't wait to change our companies. And you need to leverage those people too, because they can really, sometimes it can be infectious. Sometimes the conscious objectives are like, get those people away from me. But you need to understand who the person is and where they're at on that spectrum, because that's really how you're going to leverage their power.
No, absolutely, right. So that comment from Luigi, that triggers also the part, right? You and Michelle is making a comment too, right? You need to people that resist, you need to understand not just willing and able, but you also need to understand what influence do they have, right? So if people who are influencers, you have to keep your friends close, but your enemies closer, right? You have to really, again, it's an exercise that you need to do. That's all what I'm trying to say. Do the exercise up front of willing and able, and who is your biggest influencers, right? Who can derail what you want to do? And Luigi then with his champions, yes, that is what I was talking about with people who are willing, right? They understand it, are able. They understand it. They've been here before. They're around the block. They understand the inner workings of this organization, right? So you just need to make them willing. And part of that is what I found, not 100%, but very helpful at times, is that give them the role of the champion. Because in most organizations, there is this informal structure of leadership. Right? You have your true management, you have your directors, but the juniors in a team typically look up to the seniors of the team, right? They don't have the managerial position, the hierarchical position, but when the senior says, this is a bunch of rubbish, the juniors will say, it's probably a bunch of rubbish, right? So if we can get these people, right, make them a champion, and let them tell the team, like, hey, this is some great stuff that's coming. I'm helping them to do X, Y, and Z. It will pull the juniors in as well, right? And that is where I think to look at resistance and cultural change, that is where we, as an organization, put a lot of effort, right? I would say 80% of the effort is to get an organization with champions that are senior. Now, people that say, hey, I want to be a champion, but really pick them of the senior people that are influencers, that can help you achieve your goal, to get them on your side. That is one way that typically works relatively well.
Yes. Hector or Hector, you put in the chat. Understand the stakeholders.
Yeah.
You have nailed it. That stakeholder mapping exercise
Yeah.
is super useful. Another thing that was in this visualization of work presentation I did was stakeholder maps, because not only can then do you see the teams and the people that are involved in the change, but you can put labels on them. Where are they at as a group, or where are they at as an individual? Mark them green, they're an influencer and a change champion. Mark them yellow, they're an influencer but not a change champion. Or mark them red, they're a conscious objector, completely resistant. Or take them off the org chart completely because they don't want to do anything.
Yeah. So, but Matt, what would you? Because Michelle keeps saying that, right? Influence and power of damage. What when you know the influencers, how do you tackle that? What is your approach around that?
Yes, I tend to, if someone is an influencer, whether they're a conscious objector or a positive influencer for the change, I try to keep them on the project team. And this sounds crazy because a lot of times your project teams end up getting larger, but having those people involved during the design, during service design, at the early stages of transition, if those people, especially the conscious objectors, are involved in the design of what is going to change and how you're going to change it, you won't have to convince them, because they will be building the change, right? So that it already like removes this giant hurdle of having to convince people that are really difficult to convince.
Yeah.
Because they when it comes out, they say, yes, this is what we built. We built it together, and here's why it works, and here's why it will work, and here's why I don't think it will work. And we have tricks in our back pocket to pull when it doesn't work. We can actually change something. So that's how I think about them. I know you're a big communicator, Adrian. So how do you think about them? How do you address them?
Well, what you said, I always look at what is people's agendas, right? So, because the influencers are not necessarily directly involved with the change, right? I not to any surprise, I think everybody has had these meetings before where you have people who you really are addressing, they're directly involved with the topic that you're talking about, and then there's people in the meeting or in the project that maybe have nothing to do with what you're trying to achieve, but it doesn't withhold them from having an opinion and expressing that opinion, right? So they're becoming the distractors, right? So that's one thing. Also, I fully agree that you have to include some of these people in your project, but if they are a distractor and they have literally no impact from what you're doing, try to get them out of there. So you also need your leadership that you're working with. You need to have this open conversation about how can we get the distractors out of there. Now, there are people that have indirect impact of what you're doing. And again, to me, it is find out their agenda, right? What is in it for them? What would they want out of this? Because they're not only, but a lot of times they resist because there's also nothing for them, right? So it's or like we said, it's they want to hide that they maybe are not the best in what they do. So they start pointing fingers at everybody else. And it's easy to shoot holes at something, right? It is not easy to help make something good and better. So sometimes I will just talk to these people and say, hey, I see that you resist. I understand you have some concerns. Let's talk about this, right? So what are your concerns? And by the way, if we're doing this and this is the objective, what do you want to get out of this? I know it has some impact on you, but what would you like to get out of this? And maybe we can incorporate that into the solution and into what we're doing. And that, to what you said then earlier, that makes that get together, is you're making them part of the solution. They have collaborated, and now slowly they start becoming a supporter of what you're doing rather than the resistance of what you're doing.
Yes,
that's exactly what I would do.
Yeah. Bjorn's coming in with a good question because it's clearly where we should go next. He agrees that stakeholder management is key. Is there a specific methodology you would recommend in this regard? For example, for handling resistance to OCM? Adrian, what comes to mind right away?
I cannot really pinpoint a name for a methodology, but you can Google these things, by the way. There's a ton of spreadsheets out there that do key stakeholder management. And it's really about having a list of what are the groups that we're impacting directly, indirectly, break it down by role, right? I wouldn't go necessarily to a name level, because sometimes we address thousands of people, right? It's impossible. But a help desk support agent, management, leadership, so we fulfillers. So we can sometimes break it down by role and get a general sense, right? I said that in the beginning. We need to understand that we need to address the organization on the layers of strategic, tactical, and operational. It's not a one size fits all. It's not a one approach fits all type of deal to figure that out. So that is one thing. I need to box it that way. Now, that doesn't mean that there are, and then there's a bunch of questions, right? So how do they support this? What is the impact of this? And rank that to a level 1 to 5, because you only have so much time. There's only so much things that you can do. So you really need to start boxing that into the willing and able, the people that are key influencers, especially the ones, like you said, from a positive support, right? Put them up front, let them talk. And the ones that really want to destroy everything, right? Take them out of the equation by really by taking them out, not killing them, but taking them out of the equation, or work on making them becoming parts, because we're addressing some of their concerns. So there's a bunch of questions with that. But the follow-on of that is not just to have that list, right? Then we need to do something with those people. So then you have the list of high influencers, high objectors. Where are they from the impact? And they all have kind of approaches on what to do with them. Sometimes it's just being informed. Send them emails, have lunch and learn sessions where we talk about things, all the way down to education, training. Right? So you have to create this whole enablement map against it, communications plan that breaks that down in the same roles as you do the assessment. And then what communications do I do to operational people versus tactical versus strategic? What enablement do I need to do for them? And it's, in the end, keep always in mind, what is your goal? What do I want to get out of this? And that's how you address it.
Yeah. For the ITIL nerds in the room, which a lot of us are, because we're in IT, we can't help it. There's a lot of good frameworks out there. OCM is like service management. If you think about org change management, there's an entire method. There's tons of methodologies to use. It could be like ITIL or FitSM or Verism or IT for IT. There's lots of different frameworks that these OCM experts will leverage to help change, and they're going to leverage different aspects of them depending on where you're headed and what challenges you're hitting. The same thing in IT operations. Sometimes ITIL works, sometimes you need to break good practice and do what works for your organization. So the same thing in OCM. If you are looking to go further on this journey and understand it even further, I highly recommend a guest that I had on my podcast recently. Her name is Karen Ferris. Ferris, and she has there's tons of metaphors. Of course, there's always metaphors for this stuff, but she has a 5-step method for leaders that are trying to make change in their organizations, and it really just helps people understand, like, this is the point of the journey we're at, so this is where I need to focus my attention. These are the communications I need to focus on. These are the people I need to focus on. So definitely check that out.
Yeah.
I do want to go back to our questions a little bit. So because specifically, I think the best performing organizations have those shared experiences. So Adrian, when you think about change, how do teams make it repeatable? Like, let's say that you have a success. How do you continue on that journey? How do you get the next success and the next success? Do you have tips for that?
Man, it sounds so maybe a little bit corny or so, right? But it's always about the proven stuff, right? It's about creating that culture of adoption, creating a culture of belonging and acceptance and collaboration. And so it's also celebrate the successes, right? So if you've done something right, I think by nature, when you've done something right, and people feel involved and they feel part of the solution and they've been listened to, right? They don't always have to be actively involved or passively involved, and they feel they're getting something out of it and that we really addressed their concerns, they will jump on board next time. Why would they not, right? Because they know we did it last time, let's do it again, right? So it's keep consistent in doing things right. I hate to use the term lessons learned, because often when we have the lessons learned, they end up in the drawer and nobody looks at them again. But as the leaders in organization, right, make sure that you don't make the same mistakes again, right? So find out what made people resist. Why were you not as successful as you thought you were going to be? And then change that a little bit. Again, don't overhaul things the whole time. So have some consistency in the approach, have some consistency in the people that do this, right? Also, one of the other things that I see is that by project, we have a complete different team that starts handling the OCM, that starts handling the cultural change. Make that just a group of people that are very familiar with it, that are comfortable with that. Like you said, they need to be able to communicate, right? We can talk about a champions network, but then I have leaders, managers that point to a person because he or she is the one that has some time, but they're the biggest introvert, right? They're not talking about this stuff, right? So that is only my tips and tricks, right? That you have to make change just part of the normal routine that we do. Right? So maybe that's one thing, right? Don't try to address all the time your changes that you do in an organization as big phases, right? Just don't dump everything at the same time. Make that a constant in the organization. It just becomes natural to have to adopt and adapt, right? If that becomes the habit, if that becomes the culture, that we're an innovative company that changes to the things that happen tomorrow, then we do, right? And one of the things, I think Hector said it for early adopters, right? How do you measure? I think sometimes it's just, we ask the question. It's always the known suspects, right? We typically know in an organization who are the people that are always complaining at the water cooler, right? But who are also the people that always come up with these ideas on, hey, I like to make things better. How about we do this? How about do that? Doesn't mean that all their ideas are great, but they're the people that want to make things different. They are people that like to change things in the organization, and they will push for it. So there's not really a measurement or a metric other than, I think our gut feeling typically is right when it comes to, oh yeah, I know John, I know Jane. She's always complaining about what we're doing. So identify it through that way, sometimes very informal.
Yeah.
But Matt, what do you think?
Baby steps, man. That's where it's at. If you've seen What About Bob, you know that baby steps is the way to go. And yeah, you just have to ask the question. I'm a huge fan of design thinking, and it was my advice earlier. Make them part of the change. Add them to the project team. And if you're not doing that, or there's too many people to just invite the whole company on board, you do need to leverage research. Research is key to designing great experiences. And that goes beyond just customer experiences. That involves employee experiences too. Yeah. And you know, we can say baby steps, like, okay, yes, little baby steps. There are times where you're going to have big changes, right? Where you're ripping out a system and you're replacing it with something else, or gosh, what's another example? Leadership change is another one, or reorg is another one, where you're not able to make it really gradual, but eventually you will get what people need. You'll address through research. You'll understand their concerns about this, and it's not necessarily like you're trying to manipulate the person. They're helping you see. It's kind of like they're looking the other way. They're the eyes on the back of your head that can see things that you don't see, or see things in a different way. And the reason that I try to get people on the project team is because a lot of times that research is presented to the project teams, and through analysis, through research reviews, through breakout sessions where you're literally reading through the research or listening to the interviews, you start to get on the same page. You
Yeah.
start to realize, okay, that this concern that people have been saying isn't just a gripe.
Yeah.
It's a true concern. We should make sure that we address this so that we don't go out of business. We should make sure we address this so we don't hemorrhage 12 people from this team. And this is their ideas. These are their ideas for how to address them. Because a lot of times people will complain during an interview, during research, and then a lot of times they will follow up with, maybe this is how we can make it better, or this is another way to think about that. So
yeah,
that's kind of where I come from. What about you, Adrian? Like, when you think about struggles or changes that you've had in your career, because you and I, we've done lots of ITSM work. We've done you've probably done tons of implementations too. What are some of the problem or changes that have come across in your life that you've had a hard time with, and how did you address them?
Man, that's a very philosophical question. The inner workings of Adrian. Well, I hate to say this also, but the older you get, right, the wiser you get sometimes about these things, right? There's a difference about the very passionate, driven, go crazy Adrian in the first years of his life, right? Where, hey, why is not everybody wanting to do this, right? And then you lose people, right? Because again, wasn't always clear about what we wanted to achieve. I just had something in my mind and it needed to happen, right? So part of it is become wiser with the things that you do, right? So different people resist for different reasons, right? In the end, we call these things resistance to change and learning curve. But what is behind the resistance, right? Understanding that in an organization, then you can apply the right way of resolving that. One of the things that you, by the way, when you said leaders that come in, right, leadership change, what I see with a lot of companies is when there's a new leader coming in for whatever reason, things have to change. They bring their change.
Mm-hmm.
I feel, not in all cases, but in most cases, that is a sign of a weak organization when it comes to change management, right? You shouldn't have a new leader come in that has to overhaul everything from the start, because that already gives the people what we said in the beginning, right? Give people a sense of belonging, of control. When they're overhauling and doing things differently, that makes us feel like we're not doing our things correctly. They don't believe in what we do. They don't want to hear what we do. They don't understand what we do. So again, this thing, that whole cultural change management resistance, that needs to be managed as a culture, as a habit. It needs to be an approach. And every new leader that comes in has to be told that you cannot just rip things out, unless that is by design. But you cannot just rip things out. And there's a thought, there's a method to the madness. And Michelle also said later on what we talked about, right? Small drips of change. That doesn't mean that sometimes we don't have big changes, right? That happens. But if you're used to this constant change, then it's just a matter of size and complexity and timeline, right? It is not that all of a sudden we start resisting more when it becomes a big change. But going back to your question, right? So again, what I've just over the years, just understand that resistance comes from all different type of reasons. There's no one size fits all. The approaches to think about it, the key stakeholder management is always key. Training and enablement is always key. If you have leadership that says, hey, but I told them to do this, right? Then yeah, that's not how that works. That worked maybe 100 years ago on an assembly line, but that doesn't work in an IT organization, right? Where people are meant to think. And that's maybe another thing. And again, now we're jumping. I always say there's puzzle pieces that link together.
Exactly.
Right? So you also have to think about your talent that you have in the organization. Right? You hire a certain talent, you expect a certain thing. As even in my organization, right? We go to customers, we help customers with their strategic goals and their objectives and how they. And then when there's challenges in our own organization, they kind of look at us like, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, yeah, I kind of do. Right. So when we have these people in an organization, I think one important thing also to lower the resistance of change is to let people apply their common sense. Don't try to write down everything in detail in a process and an approach, right? Leave room for people's interpretation and people's common sense to fill in the blanks and make it fit for them.
That's exactly what I would say. Like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about when I've been resistant to change, because that's a tough question, especially for someone who's an optimist like me and wants change. It's always about the monotony, the data entry. You know, if you're gonna make me do something that is tedious, like I think back to my consulting days, time cards, man. Billing your clients, like I just remember if that process changed in any way, shape, or form, I was always going to be resistant because they were always making it harder. They wanted more detail. They wanted me to track to every 15 minutes of my work. There's tons of examples there where I just, at the very procedure level of what your employees do, you need to give more flexibility and make it common sense. It's such an easy phrase to say, common sense, but it is so difficult to design and put in.
It is difficult, right? Because your common sense, Matt, is different than my common sense.
Exactly.
Right? But it goes back a little bit to what I see Karen say in the chat, and that kind of disappeared. Here it is. She said, sometimes the resistors have a valid issue. Right?
For sure.
I would say resistors, anybody always has a valid issue, right? Mm-hmm. In their mind, in their context, in their perception, it is a valid reason to resist, whatever that may be. So one of the things I try not to do is argue with perception, right? I just need to understand their context, right? Why are you pushing back? Why are you resisting? And is there something that we can do as a project or me as an individual that can move that into the direction that we want it to be? Right? But the issue is always valid, at least for them. It may not be valid for me, but it's valid for the person who expresses it. So that is also the point, right? It doesn't help really as somebody who's trying to implement to just go into this impasse of, well, that's your issue. No, it is our issue because they might be an influencer. They might start stopping the things that we're wanting them to do. So it impacts my end result. So we're in this together. Right. So yes, Karen, you're right. They have valid reasons, and let's work on that.
Yes. And Cheryl J., you should have been on this webinar. Next time there's a panel, I want you to be on it for org change because you've nailed it. We got into a lot of people get into this industry because they think they get to work with technology all the time and that there's no people element to it. And that is just far and again totally wrong. It's always people that we're having to interact with. So anything that you can do to learn about people, how to manage people and communicate with people, those communication skills, man, it's such an important aspect. And Bernal, you triggered in my mind something that is important as well. And part of it is when we're saying what we're changing, putting it into a category is sometimes a very bad idea. Michael Cote, if you don't follow him, check out his newsletter. Absolutely fantastic. He said recently, if you're going to bring agile to an organization, don't say that you're bringing agile to the organization. That's one of the worst things you can do because already people have a preconceived notion of the failures, successes, what they are, and it encourages zealotry. We can't do this because the Agile Manifesto says we can't, or we can't do this because the Lean Thinking book says that we can't do it this way. And you're setting yourself up for disaster if you put yourself into that context. The same goes for service management. You know, if you're saying we're gonna implement ITIL, number one, you don't implement ITIL. That's the first problem there. And the second problem is you're inviting the baggage of other people's ITIL transformations along on your journey. You're inviting all that baggage to be dumped upon you. And instead, you know, maybe we're just thinking of better ways of working. And we're going to look at ITIL. And we're going to look at COBIT and ISO 20000 because we have to be compliant. So pick where you're going to pull stuff from, but make it your change. It needs to be unique to your organization and unique to your people.
Yeah. Goes down to what I sometimes say is it's about winning the war, right? Mm-hmm. What do you want to achieve in the end? And you pick the pieces that are relevant to you to win the war, not about winning each battle, right? So We don't want to win the war in the first battle. So to your point, as an organization, you need to find out what are the battles that I need to fight in order to win the war. And that goes down back to have a sense of reality versus your ambition of what you want to achieve. And this goes back to leadership, right? They have this in mind, but they are not realistic on what they can achieve as an organization. And going back to your question about how can we make this repeatable, is to not have these changes all the time where at the end you have to say, hey, we achieved 80% of our goals, but these are the 20% that we didn't do. Then create a project, create a change where you can achieve 100% of the goal or 110% of the goal, right? Make them smaller, make them bite-sized so we can celebrate success after success after success. Because if you don't, after the third time you say, we achieved 80%, people get like, what am I missing out on then? What is it we're not doing? And they become demotivated and will stop really supporting you and helping you. So also create the environment to be successful.
Yeah. It goes to that culture of continual change.
Yeah.
Like, as long as you're not, we love the idea of signposts. We love the idea because when you're hiking, I don't know, my wife does this all the time when we're hiking. She says, okay, we're just going to make it to the next corner. That next corner, we're going to make it there, and then we'll turn around. And then we get to that corner, and she says, okay, well, maybe we want to see that waterfall. So let's just keep going a little bit further. And I love it because I love hiking. But that isn't the same in your organization. Having those signposts isn't always the best idea. You want to just be hiking. Enjoy the hike.
Yeah.
Enjoy the continual improvement, because that really is where I think a lot of joy comes from. And Cheryl J coming in with the heat on the chat. Yeah. Small steps make huge impacts. Totally true. Okay.
I like what you just said, by the way, Matt, right? That sometimes it's really about the hike itself, right? So don't necessarily, there's no reason why we have to tell people that they're going to the top of the Mount Everest, right? Then some people will check out already. Like that, we're never going to be able to do that. Just say we're going on a hike, right? It's going to be cold sometimes. It's going to be steep sometimes, but we're going to get there, right? I think that's really key. I always call that be economical with the truth, right? You don't lie about things, but be very sparsome in what you inform the organization about as the next step, just to safeguard them against themselves, right? That they don't start going crazy, because we know the organization can do it. We know you can achieve it. We just have to guide them in getting there. And I think that's one of the key things with OCM, and that helps you to push the resistance down. Just make it achievable. Small steps, Cheryl. Small steps.
Dude,
yes, it's more about the journey.
Yeah. Absolutely. That is such a good point to end on, Adrian. I can't imagine that we actually have more wisdom for us to share and impart upon this group. But what I did want to do is take a moment. How can people connect with you, and so that they can learn more and pick your brain about these topics?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share I'm not sure if the email addresses are shared, but happy to share the email address. So LinkedIn, email. Anybody can always get in touch with me. I like to talk about this stuff. I'm a little bit of a geek around this. So reach out through Skill Up, through you, Matt. I mean, let's do something. Would love to do this.
Yeah, we do. We love to talk about this. We love to geek about this. Thanks to PeopleCert, excuse me, and Techstrong for having us today. Connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Adrian and I are connected, so I can connect you as well. Please do take a second to fill out the survey. Cody has linked it in the chat just now. And thank you, audience, for joining us today to consider the relationship between service management and digital transformation. And a very big thank you to our panelists, me and Adrian. And next up in the ITIL program is how service management modernization modernizes the IT help desk experience. It's on Tuesday next week. The registration is pinned in chat. Please check it out. We hope to see you there. Adrian, hope you have a great rest of your week.
It's the same, Matt. Rest of the world. Have a wonderful rest of the week and day, and we'll see you next time.
See you.